Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just going to give it another moment while folks are still entering from the waiting room. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Kaylee Pratt. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Partnership for Strong Communities, and we're very excited to have you here today for PSC Presents Planning and Zoning Commissioner Training across the U.S. So before we get started, I just want to touch base on a couple housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, and we will do our best to make that recording available to you following the presentation as soon as possible. All participants have entered muted. If you have any technology issues, you can go to the chat icon in your Zoom control panel and select chat and send it to PSC Zoom meetings or the host. I know I have listed there Charlie Shaddix, but I believe he shows up right now as PSC Zoom meetings. So send it on there and we will do our best to assist you. And I will hold some time at the end of the webinar to answer some questions. If you have any questions, please utilize the question and answer function in your Zoom control panel. And there's an image of it here on this screen. So all right. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we'll be looking at today, I will first touch base a little bit on the Home Connecticut Advisory Committee and the recommendation for Planning and Zoning Commissioner training and how we came to that legislative priority. Talk a little bit about the need, as well as an overview of state requirements. And then finally, we'll touch base on the audience question and answer. All right. So first up, we'll talk a little bit about Home Connecticut. Partnership for Strong Communities has two campaigns. First, the Reaching Home campaign, which works to prevent and end homelessness, and the Home Connecticut campaign that works to end Connecticut's affordable housing shortage. And the goal is to ensure that all Connecticut residents have access to a range of safe, affordable homes in all communities across the state. Since 2004, the campaign has brought together more than 100 diverse stakeholders, and these include housing advocates, nonprofit organizations, business leaders, lenders, nonprofit and for-profit developers, and builders who care about this mission to ensure that every resident has a safe, stable place to call home. And further, we know that when our state's residents have stable housing, it also improves their health as well as economic outcomes. Each year, we work closely with an advisory committee that's made up of a broad-based coalition, and I've listed our advisory committee members here. And this committee works to identify legislative and administrative priorities that move us closer to that goal of ensuring safe, stable housing for all. So this is our Home Connecticut 2021 legislative agenda that we worked with that advisory committee to to develop, and we have identified 5 priorities for the 2021 legislative session that we've broken into 3 categories: reform land use, invest in affordable housing, and stabilize the rental market for tenants and landlords. So today, of course, we're talking about that second one that's listed, which is mandating training on housing issues for local planning and zoning commissioners. So why are we looking at this? We know that in Connecticut, the planning and zoning officials make critical land use decisions that impact their communities for many years, in fact, generations. And across Connecticut, our planning and zoning commissioners are made up of residents who volunteer their time and there's no prerequisite training or experience in land use that's needed in order to serve their communities. We believe that these volunteers deserve to have the education and resources necessary in order to make the informed decisions for their communities. And we also feel that this education about laws that govern their communities would, in fact, make for their meetings more efficient and streamline processes. So really feel that this is a benefit to those volunteers who serve for their communities and really want what's best for their communities. So in order to kind of frame this conversation, we took a look at the states that are requiring training across the country. And right now there's currently 7 states that do so. And then there's also a few states that encourage training, but don't require it. The 7 states that are requiring training are New York, New Jersey, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Maryland. And um, I thought it would be helpful today to share a little bit about what each of those states are doing in terms of what they require and how they deliver that training. And I do want to preface the conversation by saying that in most instances, I use commissioner and board member interchangeably. But really what I mean is those who are serving their planning and zoning boards. And to that point, states and even different municipalities call their boards different things. They split them into different ways. Some are called planning boards, some are zoning boards, some are joint planning and zoning boards, zoning board of appeals. Generally speaking, I'm talking about planning and zoning boards, and we'll call them planning and zoning commissions throughout the presentation. So I mean the same thing. If you have any questions on specifics, please feel free to reach out. So first up, our closest neighbor here is New York. So in New York, in 2007, legislation was passed that required all planning and zoning members to meet a mandatory minimum of 4 hours of training annually. And those members are able to carry an additional 4 hours into subsequent years to meet their requirements. The governing board of each municipality develops these requirements for their commissions. And New York allows for these trainings to be delivered in a number of ways. So it can be done in classroom setting, distance learning, video, on-site demonstration, and self-study. And they outline a few of the ways that these trainings can be received by municipality themselves putting on the training, regional or county planning offices, similar to our Council of Governments that we have in Connecticut, county planning federations, START agencies, statewide municipal associations, colleges, or similar entities. So to give you a little bit of a look at what New York does, here we have the course listings from the it's New York Department of State Division of Local Government Services. Sorry, I want to make sure I get that right. And they provide many course offerings to commissioners. As you'll see here, there's a list of course offerings, and some of those are available on demand. Others are courses that are scheduled that folks can join. They also put out this nice flyer on the winter webinar series, and you can see that there's a number of different types of courses that folks can take in order to meet their requirements in New York. In New Jersey, we also see that that training is required and the training, sorry, is can be no longer than 5 hours and must be able to be completed within 1 day. And New Jersey specifies that training should be in land use law and planning, and that is what meets the requirement of New Jersey's training statute. The Commissioner of Community Affairs in New Jersey is tasked with working with the New Jersey planning officials to develop the curriculum and to administer that training. And in this next slide, we'll see here that that's New Jersey's webpage, the planning officials webpage that offers, again, on-demand training as well as in non-COVID times in-person workshops. So moving west a bit is Tennessee. In Tennessee in 2002, the legislature began requiring their training. And this training is that all commissioners must meet a minimum of 4 hours of training in qualifying subjects annually. And the initial training must be completed within 1 year of the appointment. So Tennessee also identifies qualifying subjects, and those include things like land use law, public hearing procedure, economic development, housing, among others. And the municipality is tasked with providing their training and covering any travel expenses that are related to this requirement. So in order to fulfill that, that training requirement for commissioners, we have a couple examples here. We have the Southeast Tennessee Development organization that works to put on, they have this is from 2017, but this was a day-long training that allowed people to cover all of their requirement in 1 day. Additionally, the Tennessee chapter of the American Planning Association puts on trainings as shown in this photo here. They also provide YouTube videos and on-demand sessions. So really, in Tennessee, they're providing multiple organizations are trying to meet those requirements, but it's ultimately up to the municipality to make sure that their commissioners get that training. All right, taking a look at Kentucky. Kentucky passed HB 55 in 2001, and the reason why I say HB 55 instead of identifying any of the other statutes or bills in the previous states is that in Kentucky, the commissioners call it HB 55. It's the HB 55 requirement. So on the websites, it's fulfilling that number, HB 55. So in Kentucky, they require each member of planning commissions complete a minimum of 4 hours of orientation training. And this has to be done within 120 days of serving on their commission. And it also can be done prior to joining that commission. Within a year prior to joining a commission, you can fulfill that requirement. The Planning Commission, or legislative body where the Planning Commission has jurisdiction, is responsible for the costs that are associated with that training. And as the previous state in Tennessee, they also identify similar subjects, including land use planning, public hearing procedure, economic development, and housing as subjects that must be covered. And here we are that the HB 55 requirement, an example of training. This is conducted by the Kentucky League of Cities and is available both online and in person. Yep. Yes, I'm just verifying it. That is this year. So in fact, they are having in-person session. All right. And taking a look at next up, South Carolina. In South Carolina in 2003, they began requiring a minimum of 6 hours of orientation training within the first year of service. And this, a continuing learning education is required annually of 3 hours. Similar to Tennessee and Kentucky, they identify land use planning, public hearing procedure, economic development, housing, among other subjects that must be covered by this training. And the South Carolina Planning Education Advisory Committee provides guidance regarding approved training for this orientation, as well as the continuing education requirement. So that advisory committee offers web-based training on their website. So here is uh, a screen grab of their website that has a list of some of the approved training for 2020. Additionally, the South Carolina Association of Counties offers training by DVD that you can request that can be shipped to you and played for your commissions, or they also have a web-based learning portal similar to other states. Louisiana, they implemented their training to require a minimum of 4 hours within the first year of service as well. Training subjects are identified to include duties, responsibilities, ethics, and substance of the commission to which they were appointed. And the local parish or municipal planning commission is the body that is tasked with approving training. And here we have an example of the Louisiana chapter of the American Planning Association, similar to as we've seen in other states, providing resources on their webpage. And here, I believe this one was, yes, 2018. They had an in-person training that was a 4-hour training to fulfill that requirement. They also have opportunities for folks to learn online. And the last state that we'll cover today is Maryland. Maryland is the most recent state to adopt this a requirement. Members are required to complete training within 6 months of appointment, and they also identify substantive areas that must be covered during that training, including local land use, planning and zoning, and their state comprehensive plan, which is similar to our POCDs. Delivery in Maryland can be done through local jurisdictions developing their own training, or there is a statewide model that was developed by the Maryland Department of Planning, and they provide planning that would fulfill that requisite training. So here is the example of Maryland's planning website. The Department of Planning has this seven module training that they've put together that's meant to last about 6 hours. And this covers all of those prerequisites that are required by that training requirement. So as we can see, the states that have adopted training do so in the range of 4 to 6 hours annually. Some of those have only requirements upon initially joining a board, and others require those annually as a continuing learning education. Additionally, most of the states identify subject matters that are important in the planning of their state, and those subject matters are identified in statute. And all of these states allow for commissioners to receive this training in a web-based platform, which is much more flexible than folks who would have to take a day during the week or on the weekend in order to fulfill that requirement. So it really adds flexibility. And as we know from the last year, we can accomplish quite a lot through Zoom and webinar platforms, and they can be quite interactive. So what are we recommending? Our recommendation in the 2021 legislative agenda for home Connecticut is to mandate housing issues for local planning and zoning commissions, and have a requirement of 5 hours be met starting by 2023. And we also recommend developing a state training curriculum that allows for local planning and zoning commissioners to fulfill those educational requirements and include education on a variety of housing types, as well as multifamily housing and fair housing. So here I have our full recommendation, which I will also say is available on our website. So please feel free to take a look at that. We also, as I mentioned a second ago, that one of the recommendations is that we develop a state training curriculum, and this is actually similar to something that's already happening in Connecticut, which is with the inland wetland watercourse agencies. The Department of Energy and Environmental Protection currently provides a training program for certain members of those inland wetland watercourse agencies, and they provide a training program, workshops, as well as a learning portal. Unfortunately, right now, the learning portal is in the middle of being redone, so I don't have the ability to show you that right now, but it is something that the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection is currently working on. So that leads us to kind of what we can do, what is being done currently. Right now, the legislature is actively hearing recommendations for training requirements, and we have offered our support as well as worked with our advisory committee members to further that. Additionally, we are telling people to please share information about planning and zoning training with your networks about the importance of making sure our commissioners are informed and have resources that they need to really move forward in their communities, and reach out to representatives, especially this year, now that everything is being done remotely and there's not legislative office building that's bustling with people walking around and sharing their priorities. We're saying to reach out to your representative and let them know they are interested in hearing from their constituents what's important to them. Sign up for legislative updates from the partnership. If you haven't done so already, we do try and send out any action alerts that are necessary in if there's anything that you can do to help. So last week we had a planning and development committee meeting, so we sent out an action alert to let folks know how and when to testify. And lastly, to visit our advocacy page, which I've included the link there, as well as just a screen grab of a recent Planning and Zoning Commission training fact sheet that we worked on. All right. All right, so and I've listed sources. If you have any questions about anything that I've shared today or any interest in any of these sources, please go ahead and reach out to me. I have my contact information is at the end of this, and I'm happy to share any of my sources. I've written a bit of research on this, so I'd be happy to share that, as well as we have a blog on our website about it as well. And we have about 5 minutes remaining, so I'm going to take a look at the the Q&A chat window that way I can see. Let me take a look here. And I do apologize that I'm going to be reading these as uh, as I'm talking. So yes, all the recordings and PowerPoints are going to be available on our website. It was noted that Yukon Clear's Land Use Academy has educational resources available. There is a question regarding whether or not there's a quorum of trained members and what happens. And Bob, I'd be happy to speak with you, since we only have 4 minutes left, offline about this if you're interested. Some other states handle this a little differently based on whether or not they have enough trained commissioners. So there's different nuances. This is something that particular question is not something in the raised bill that has been addressed, but it would certainly be something that would require whichever body is going to be governing and providing the training would have to address that issue. Yep, and there's some great information about the deep training. A question on a recommendation on who would be doing the training and monitoring. This is a continuing conversation that we've had, and there are a number of proposals out there. Our recommendation would be to have the state develop this, and I think a place that might start would be the Department of Housing. However, that's a continuing conversation. And Laura, I'd be happy to talk with you further on that. There's the question of, is this the only bill proposed? So there are a couple bills that incorporate land use training, the commissioner training in them, one of them being the 1026, which is the one I think I listed in a couple slides back on our legislative agenda. And then there's a training component involved in 1024, which is the desegregate CT training. Who or how would be? How do you propose we fund? So I think our recommendation would be to first have conversations, like I mentioned, with the Department of Housing regarding requiring training, as well as potentially with DEEP, because they are already doing a similar type of training. And in that way, try to avoid adding any costs to having like an additional, in some states, start new planning departments. Instead of doing something like that, I would suggest trying to do it in-house. And I think we are just about at time. I'm just gonna go ahead and, all right, I will, since I don't have time there's a couple more questions in here. Please feel free to reach out to me. Here is my contact information. I'd be happy to talk about this more. As I mentioned, we have more resources that I'd be happy to share. And for those of you who have raised questions about who would go ahead and fund this or run this programming, and what would happen in the case, this is all information that would be helpful if we talked more about and had obviously more informed discussions in order to bring this to the legislature. So I'm absolutely happy to talk to anyone who is interested in talking more. All righty. I think that concludes our webinar, and I really appreciate you coming today, and look forward to continuing this discussion. So thank you so much, and have a nice afternoon. Take care.